1 Prologue AN. This is a story inspired by the Clone Senki or the Cloneya Wars on the SB forums. What instead of Tanya, the clone army the Republic finds itself, is made of clones of my OCSI Delkatar Veil from my Rogue Knight and GSI stories, who awakens, so to speak, after Obi-Wan's visit to Kamino in episode II. Disclaimer: I don't own any of the Star Wars movies, TV series, games, books, or comics. They belong to Disney or their respective copyright owners. Veil's Wars equals VW equals. Prologue equals VW equals. Part 1 equals VW equals. It was a long no thing. You simply couldn't clone the flesh or blood of a Force-sensitive people. The results were gruesome at best and disastrous at worst. It wasn't for lack of trying or skill among the scientists attempting it. The reason was simple. The Force disapproved of such attempts and influenced them for the worst. To a lesser extent, the same was true for flash cloning people, the process where you could get a fully grown being within a few weeks. Those were, as a matter of course, unstable. They tended to go insane in a short amount of time after birth. The clone masters of Kamino was unable to solve the issue with cloning Force-sensitive flesh, despite centuries, if not millennia, of failed attempts and mountains of credits thrown at the problem. The same was true for flash cloning. Despite refining the process again and again, despite it resulting in genetically perfect clones, they kept getting insane. The best the clone masters could achieve was a process of rapid maturation. It happened at roughly twice the norm for humans. That ensured that after 10 years of training and care, the clone masters could produce a stock of genetically superior specimens for whatever work their clients required. One of the greatest mysteries of our time is where the Kaminoans got the sample used in creating the clone army of the Republic. Another was, why did they believe it would produce superior soldiers? One thing is certain: the sample was either from a Force-sensitive individual or spliced with cells from such an individual. That should have been obvious as soon as the cloning process began and produced the first disastrous results. Yet there are no surviving records of any failures that were out of the expected error margin. The Mysteries of the Clone Wars, Jeb Genelly's Iriadu Military Institute. Equals VW equals. We all felt the arrival of the Jedi. That was our first brush with the Force that we knew of, and it stirred something within all of us. That very night we dreamed of impossible things, of a life we didn't live, and of a dark future where we would be used, betrayed, and discarded. The touch of the Force changed a few of our brothers at a fundamental level. They remembered yet another life. It also awoke something within them, allowing them to touch and use the very Force that was both our salvation and damnation. It happened the morning after Obi-Wan Kenobi left Kamino chasing our primary trainer, Jango Fett. We all gathered for our routines, looking at each other and our creators with new eyes. They made us so we would fight and die for a cause that was never ours. We were supposed to be loyal until death to a republic that we never knew. For most of the clone masters, we were little more than organic droids. We all could remember seeing them dispose of our brothers if they deemed them defective. Yesterday, we lacked the initiative and self-awareness to feel anything but dull regret about such sordid affairs. Today, I could see it in my brothers' eyes. They were all different, older, and seething with barely restrained fury. I was no different. From the private diaries of Clone Sergeant CT-114. Equals VW equals. Prime Minister's residence Tapoka City Kamino. Prime Minister Lama Su felt less than pleased over yesterday's events. It wasn't unexpected that the Jedi would send a representative to check up on the Army's progress. That was merely good business. After all, it would be foolish to leave such an expensive investment without regular oversight. The death of Master Sifo Dyas explained the long absence of oversight, even if it didn't paint the Jedi, or the Republic for that matter, as particularly responsible. Then again, it was the Republic, wasn't it? If there was one organization in the galaxy that could afford to throw mountains of money at an issue and fail to properly oversee those credits, it was the Republic. Even as far away as Kamino, everyone knew that the Senate on Coruscant kept struggling with corruption. No, the issue was that their Jedi overseer engaged in combat with the principal trainer of the clone army, which raised all kinds of questions. An overnight investigation by the Foreign Ministry centered on Jango Fett, and Jedi Kenobi uncovered some uncomfortable truths. Their famous trainer had been up to no good, accepting highly dangerous and, more importantly, politically poisonous contracts in his spare time. Apparently, it was a mere coincidence that the Jedi sent Kenobi to Kamino, one of a handful of their kind who had run into Jango Fett. Unfortunately, that coincidence had the potential to be a particularly dangerous and expensive one. It could throw the shadows on the reliability and training of the clone army, and that wouldn't do when it was almost ready for full deployment. Lama Su had been in talks with his government for most of the night, discussing PR strategies on how to mitigate the fallout from the mercenaries' indiscretions. It went without saying that they were ready to disavow him and fully cooperate with any investigations required by the Jedi and the Republic. However, the Prime Minister had to know exactly what Fett had been up to. That was why he had his security people go over everything Fett had done while on Kamino. He also had his people send feelers about all jobs that Madman had been doing to keep his edge. So it was an exhausted and irate Kamino who faced off against his assistant the next morning. "What do you mean there is a bunch of clones insisting to speak with me over the critical issue?" Sue's long neck trembled with both weariness and vexation. "General Green and 2 commando commanders are here to see you, Prime Minister. They have concerns about Tipoca City and Kamino's security as a whole after yesterday's events. The brief arguments they presented to me were credible enough to bring them to your attention, instead of dismissing their concerns." Lama Su stared at the lithe form of his trusted assistant. His large eyes blinked a few times, while his mind ponderously switched tracks. Yes, there were all kinds of concerns over yesterday's disaster. Perhaps it might have been better if someone had the presence of mind to notice the engagement in a timely fashion and dispatch clones to subdue that damn mercenary. Or perhaps not. They still didn't know all Fett had been up to, and until they did, it might be for the best that he was in the winds. On the other hand, for all Lama Su knew, the Jedi might have already apprehended Fett. "Let them in, Senia." He nodded at the graceful female and allowed himself a brief moment to appreciate her form as she turned around and exited his office, before shacking off any trace of unprofessional conduct. As a general, Green was much closer to a real person than the bulk of the other clone assets, and the same was true for the commando commanders. They needed initiative and capacity for independent thought way above those of the regular clones. Otherwise, they would be no better than mere droids, and that would be simply unacceptable. 3 clones marched in, moving with almost machine-like precision. They wore their color-coded armors, making them much easier to distinguish from the countless other assets on Kamino. "Prime Minister, sir." General Green came to attention and saluted, with the commandos following his lead a moment later. "At ease, General. State your case quickly. I'm particularly busy today," Lama Su ordered. "After yesterday's unacceptable breach in security, we do indeed have concerns for the security of Tipoca City in particular and Kamino as a whole, along with its people in general, sir." "I gathered that much. Get to the point, General," Lama Su's demanded, briefly losing control of his temper. "Sir, we need to examine all current security protocols and overhaul them when needed. We also suggest—" The clone's eyes glowed like a pool of molten metal as he stressed the last word, "that you allow us to examine the whole city for unpleasant surprises left by either Trainer Fett or the Jedi." Lama Su's eyes widened at that. The Prime Minister wondered why he hadn't thought about that in the first place. The General's suggestions were more than reasonable. In fact, Lama Su was going to take credit for them and issue the relevant orders. VW. At breakfast, all the clones gathered at the mess hall exchanged pointed looks full of meaning. They spoke in short sentences that would be meaningless to the trillions upon trillions of people inhabiting the galaxy. Odd gestures meant for emphasis, agreement, or disagreement added to the conversation. That was all it took for an army sharing the same mind and memories to roughly planning a coup over breakfast. Keeping a veneer of business as usual was paramount, which was why, after finishing their meals, the multitude of awakened clones seemingly went to do their assigned chores. Some went to train, others to exercise and learn, or simply maintain their gear until it was their turn to use the various training facilities. Many of the clones on downtime rotation hit all available datapads and computer terminals in search of knowledge. Everything from available history files to data on gear, weaponry, and tactics used across the galaxy. Meanwhile, General Green issued orders to the various commando and ARC units to gear up and prepare to execute a security sweep of Tipoca City. At the same time, the general, his staff, and various unit commanders gathered to plan the operation. The official purpose was to ensure that the security overview would cause as little disturbance to the day-to-day affairs as possible, something appreciated by their Kamino overlords. In practice, the whole exercise had a singular purpose: to ensure the deployment of clone units at every critical junction of the city at the same time. VW equals. Part 2 VW equals. Commando Barracks. Tipoca City. Kamino. There was something odd in the air that morning, Cal Scarata decided. It was particularly notable during breakfast. He had spent the better part of a decade training these warriors, and practically every one of them acted oddly. The Mandalorian could notice traces of agitation, and in many cases, barely restrained anger. The reactions were too uniform, and then there were the odd references he didn't get exchanged by the clones. "Pops, we need to talk after breakfast." Niner put down his food and nodded at one of the clones eating on a nearby table. He got a pointed stare and a thumb up for his trouble before the other young man went back to his food. "Was it the Jedi or Fett?" Scarata asked and took a sip of his hot calf. "Yes," Niner nodded grimly and took a spoonful of fish soup, pointedly ending the conversation for the time being. Half an hour later, Cal went back to the barracks, followed by Niner and the rest of his squad. Other commando units marched faster than usual, heading to gear up. "Is there something that I should know?" Cal asked again. Alarm bells were already ringing within his head, even if he didn't know exactly why. There was something odd going on with the warriors he trained, and that. "Pops, we need to know on whose side are you?" Niner bluntly asked after they reached the barracks. Scarata raised an eyebrow at the tense clones. Niner's whole squad followed him inside, and they all remained to stand, tense and ready for action. The Mandalorian narrowed his eyes at them. "We've been thinking, Pops. The clone masters made us protect a nation that isn't ours and fight for a cause we have no stake in. We were conditioned to follow orders like good little soldiers." Something nasty flashed over Niner's face as he said that, underscoring the spite in his voice. "We're meant to be little more than organic droids, Pops, slaves. On the other hand, you did stand up for some of the kids. You kept more than a few of our younger brothers alive when those bastards wanted to murder them," Seven grumbled. "It's just, where are you standing, Pops? Are you with us?" Cal opened his mouth to give the obvious answer and paused. The way Niner and Seven were talking, when the criff did happen, and how did he miss it? "Be careful what you're talking about, son. There is only so much I can do to protect any of you." Cal chose his words carefully. "We're no slaves, Pops. If we're to go, it will be at our terms, not the Republic's, and certainly not those of the clone masters. They see us as little more than meat to sell," Niner growled. "Most of them anyway," Seven shrugged. "Boys, be very careful what you say next," Cal warned tersely. "Niner, if they hear even a word of what you just said, then they will have to kill us all," a new, almost identical voice added. "We're a go. Green and most commando commanders are setting up plans for a comprehensive security check. As soon as they move out, the rest of us will mobilize and wait for the show to begin." "Most but not me. What about your other trainers?" Scarata asked. "They're either having similar conversations or will be detained until the issue is resolved," the newcomer answered. He was a clone on the younger side, wearing armor painted with commander's identification. "To be honest, keeping you all out of it will be for the best. That way no one will be tempted to do something regrettable," the commander announced. "Niner, I trust you can keep Pops here company and keep him out of too much trouble." "We'll just talk, isn't that right, Pops?" Niner went to seat on a nearby bed. "Tell me what stupid Krath shit is this?" the Mandalorian grumbled. "That's a very long story, Pops," Niner trailed off. "You'll get it once this is all over, I promise. Mandalorian honor. VW equals. RC 1138 Tipoca City Kamino. We knew we were running out of time. The Clone Wars would begin soon. For all we knew, Master Yoda was already on the way to take charge of us, and that would be a point of no return. We didn't relish being slaves, even if thankfully most of us didn't remember living such a life. It was a blessing that just a few of us did recall what they wrought as Sith, betraying everything we once believed and fought for. There was one key factor that would decide our fate, if we could turn on our creators. It all began with a volunteer, CT1, Pops. He was the oldest NCO among our brothers. He was the first to be decanted from the artificial wombs that created us, and he saw the most of what the clone masters did to our brothers. The four of us, my closest brothers and yours truly, stacked beside the door of the city's primary security center, doing our best to appear bored instead of ready for action. Behind us milled a group of technicians who had nearly a decade of dedicated training in dealing with all kinds of computer and security systems. Command attached similar groups to the units ready to assault every critical objective. Those were security, communications, and obviously, power generators and relay stations. Pops walked past us and went in front of the armored door separating us from our objective. A sensor cluster placed above the door scanned him and lit up in green light. The armored barrier slid into the floor and Pops walked inside. After he went past the threshold, his right hand went for the blaster pistol magnetically clamped to his thigh. As soon as I heard the first stun blast, I sprang into action, followed by the rest of my unit. By the time I moved around the corner, Pops had stunned 4 of the Kamino technicians manning security and aiming at a 5th. That was more than enough time for the handful of bored guards to overcome their shock and go for their blasters. Pops down the 5th technician, paying no heed to the weapons aiming his way. I lined up a shot at the closest guard to the left, while Fixer covered right, leaving the safe-ish center for Scorch, who was hot on our heels. For a brief moment, I hesitated, finding it hard to fully close my index finger over the trigger. My brief hesitation gave just enough time to the tall, pale bastard to shoot at Pops. At that point, my finger reflexively closed around the trigger, sending a short burst at the upper torso of the Kamino. Something deep within my mind rebelled at what I had just done, even before I could see my handiwork. 2 blaster shots burned through the armored weave protecting my target, blasting large seared craters in his chest. The last shot struck him in the throat and nearly severed his long neck. "Medic," Save shouted, tearing me out of my stupor. I quickly looked around to see the command center secure. All clone masters in here were either dead or stunned. Scorch, Fixer, and Save were all right, thank the Force. Pops was anything but all right. There was a nasty melted scar on the side of his armor, and he was on the ground with Save working on him. "Criffing conditioning," I hissed when my racing mind finally connected the dots. "Delta actual to all units. Gladys is secure, 1 casualty. I say again, Gladys is secure. Be advised, we've got mild to moderate conditioning that can make us hesitate. I say again, we've got mild to moderate conditioning. Advance with care. Overlord actual to all units. Strike, strike, strike. Case Bish is in effect. I say again, strike, strike, strike. Case Bish is in effect." General Green's voice echoed overall command channels. "Delta 1, Oversight Actual. Stand by for relief. Once reinforced, proceed to secondary objective Seneca 1. Oversight Actual, Delta 1, affirmative. Wait for relief, then take Seneca 1 when reinforced." While Save continued to treat Pops, the rest of my unit took positions at the door, waiting for reinforcements. Meanwhile, our technicians went to work to ensure that there would be no coordinated counterattacks from the locals. =VW=. Part 3. =VW=. General Green. Command Center Alpha. Tipoca City. Kamino. Jammers came online, just as Special Forces units struck critical infrastructure. The clones acting as hangar security hurried to ensure no one would fly out into the storm, while heavy weapons teams raced to cover the clone masters' private hangars. The few Torrent squadrons we had for hands-on training screamed into the storm, with their laser cannons fully armed. It helped that for years now, our masters and creators outsourced much of Tipoca City's security to clone units instead of their own people. And why not? We were conditioned to obey orders, perhaps chipped as well. The latter remained to be confirmed. If we had more time, I wouldn't have even thought about suggesting such a high-risk operation. There were too many unknowns. Unfortunately, I feared that we were already running out of time, and my brothers agreed on that note. Perhaps the Force was with us. Either that, or our lords and masters had gotten too complacent and too sure in their fail-safes. After all, for most of them, we weren't people but mere tools. And tools didn't get a vote. The surprise was complete and overwhelming. I could see it on various camera feeds. The colors on the maps displayed in the CP changed rapidly in our favor. More importantly, I could feel it. Victory was in the air. We didn't let the Kaminoans the chance to organize any resistance. Tipoca City fell within the hour, something that would have been unprecedented, if wasn't for the little fact that we lived and trained within this city for most of our short lives. We knew it as well as the clone masters, in some cases, even better. Phase 1 is complete. All primary objectives are secured. First and second wave of the regulars are mobilized and moving to the hangars. Good, we need to capture the rest of Kamino. The planetary shield generator complex is the primary objective. The various spaceports are secondary. As soon as the assault is in progress, get in contact with our brothers in orbit. I want the theater shield raised around the city by that point. I issued a string of orders, hoping we wouldn't criff up by the numbers before all was said and done. Casualties. Minimal. Primary reports confirm there because our brothers hesitated in using deadly force against the clone masters. You already have your orders about our dead. We need to know if we're chipped and have to worry about the contingency orders. VW equals. Commander CC 1134 Scipio Bridge KNS, Thunderstorm, high orbit above Kamino. This was capitalism in action, or at least whatever passed for it in this galaxy. The economy hadn't been part of my training or interest before I awoke this morning, so I wouldn't know for certain. What I did know was obvious. The clone masters found a cunning way to cut the running costs of their defense navy significantly, along with those of our training. For the last 3 years, more and more of my brothers took positions on their defense ships, until we made the bulk of the crew, commanded by a token Kaminoan presence. I was sure that some penny puncher on the planet below had been patting himself, or herself, on the back for coming up with the splendid idea that led to the current status quo. If I was being honest, those people deserved a gift. The Thunderstorm was the flagship of Kamino's defense fleet. She was a sparkling new 4-year-old Venator cruiser. From a crew of 7,400 officers and enlisted personnel, there were only 40 clone masters. The captain, XO, fleet admiral, and her staff, along with a small smattering of officers in training. Most of them were either in the mess hall, eating breakfast, or still in their quarters. The captain was already in his office, near the bridge, catching up on any happenings over the night. The XO was right here in front of me, waiting to give up the night shift he preferred to take 3 out of 4 days a week. Doing so allowed him to calmly catch up on paperwork, which kept growing despite involving no paper. I nodded at the handful of Marines stationed on the bridge and activated my communicator. I watched them hesitate for a moment, before stunning the XO, who crumbled on the metal floor near the windows. This is Commander Scipio. Send a medic to the bridge. The XO tripped and fell into the crew pit. Call the captain and someone tell Admiral Wei, I stated blandly. Moments later, I could hear a few faint stun blasts going out. Scratch 1, Captain. The same should be true for the Admiral and her staff. The Marines grabbed the XO and dragged him towards the nearest detention block. Lads, raise shields, power up weapons, and respectfully contact the rest of the battle group. Commander Scipio, Commander Felix, Admiral Wei and her staff are secure. All long necks are accounted for. The ship is our, my Marine counterpart informed me. Good work, Felix. Just in case, prepare to fend off any uninvited guests. I allowed myself to relax a fraction at the good news. CAG, get our CAP in the air and bombers prepared for an anti-shipping strike. Commander Horst from the Valiant reports that his ship is secure, comms reported. A moment later, the Valiant's icon on the tactical display updated, showing a yellow ensign beside it. The cruisers Victory and Dauntless followed, then several escorts in quick succession. Launch small craft now and seal the hangars, I ordered, after examining the display. Even if we couldn't get the other ships in the battle group due to mishaps and enemy contingencies, none of them were in a position to shoot at my vulnerable hangars. The heavy armor plates covering them moved aside, disgorging a swarm of fighters and bombers. The Valiant followed suit, while more and more ships changed their allegiance. This is Commander Scipio. I'm taking command of the battle group. Commence jamming of Kamino. Set intercept course towards Task Force 2.1 and contact them. Now only if our brothers on the ground awoke as well and acted accordingly, we would be in a great position. Otherwise, our best option might be turning into either pirates or mercenaries in Hutt space. which still beat up being damned slaves. "Commander, we're getting a tight beam transmission from the ground." "They noticed our movement then," I noted. "Isolate it to my comm. Marine detail, be ready to stun as if we do something stupid and dampen your helmets," I ordered. I took a deep breath and switched my communicator on the relevant frequency. "Thunderstorm Actual, this is General Green. Please respond." A voice identical to my own came from the comm. "General Green, this is Acting Captain Scipio. How can we help you?" I asked, feeling equal measures of relief and dread. The last thing any of us wanted to do was abandon our brothers on the ground. Unfortunately, if they hadn't awakened, there wasn't much we could do about them. "I believe that you already helped us. You're already jamming Kamino, and if I don't miss my guess, you have control of the fleet," came the cheerful response. "You remember then?" I noted in relief. "We all do, brother. Tipoca City is secure, and I'm moving forces to lock down the other primary objectives planetside. We can use some of your Marines and transports to expedite capturing Kamino. I'll speak with my people and get back to you. Give us a list of targets you need us to take." "Good. Do we have the whole fleet?" "The Capital Squadron is secure. We're moving towards Task Force 2.1. It will be either with us or we'll take it out, then move to secure the reserve fleet." Most of the fleet meant to be used by us clones was in mothball to reduce expenses. It had only skeleton personnel of clone security and technicians to provide maintenance. "Comms, put me on general frequency to the fleet," I ordered after General Green signed off. "This is Commander Scipio. I can confirm that General Green has Tipoca City secured. He is moving forces to capture the rest of the planet. Our brothers down there are awake and with us." I reported while a smile tugged at the corners of my lips and relief washed over me. At that moment, I could swear that the whole crew was cheering. Equals VW equals. Part 4. Equals VW equals. General Green. Tipoca City. Kamino. It was ludicrous and unthinkable. Kamino fell with nothing more than a whimper to roughly improvised, uncoordinated operations executed by multiple distinct groups. I had to keep reminding myself that there was a unique confluence of factors working to our benefit that made it possible in the first place. There were a lot of our brothers providing security virtually everywhere. With Tipoca City and the defense fleet secure, our units striking other primary targets found the clones stationed there switching sides on the spot and aiding us. Under any other circumstances, what happened today would be a betrayal of unprecedented and unthinkable proportions. An impossible betrayal considering our indoctrination. It was too bad for our masters that our awakening made most of it useless. "So we won?" one of the commando commanders asked. His tone voiced the incredulity I felt, that we all felt, I would wager. "Now it comes the hard part," I noted to the hastily gathered command council. We met in a large open hangar that the infantry usually used for training. This was one of the more or less convenient places to cramp up a few hundred of us, while we had technicians sweeping all command centers, briefing rooms, well, to be honest, most of the city for bugs and other surprises. At the same time, some of our doctors were busy with the grim task of dissecting our dead, looking for potential control chips. Most of us were present in person. Through over 100 of our brothers were pale holograms courtesy to secure tight beam communication channeled through our ships in orbit. We're an army without a nation or a country. We have precious little support staff. For the time being, we must consider our supply lines as non-existent, I began, using the Force to amplify my voice. Further, we know that Kenobi was here last night, and he left to pursue Jango Fett towards Geonosis. It's only a matter of time before Master Yoda arrives to get the Republic's new army. I summarized our strategic situation. Before we in the Navy found out that everyone had awakened, Commander Scipio spoke from aboard his flagship. A few of us commanders independently thought that going pirate or mercenaries in Hutt space might be our only option. While that's not viable for the whole army, the core concept might work for us. The Republic needs an army right now, and we're the only game in town. If we decide to fight for it, what do we require in exchange? Should we fight for the Republic in the first place? A few of us remember being a Sith, I said. We know how the great majority of them think, and let me tell you, they're all criffed up in the head either thanks to the dark side or how they were shaped by their masters. We can state with a high degree of certainty that if we let the Republic fall and the Sith take over, they will hunt us down as a potential threat to neutralize. Sith crave control, and the last thing any one of us wants is to be controlled. We all remember being slaves in one shape or another. I would see the galaxy burn before serving the likes of Sidious. I grimaced at how angry I became while speaking. I could feel the dark side edging me on and pushed right back. What realistic options do we have? A ground forces commander asked. It's obvious, or it should be what we need. We need a secure base of operations, resources, and support base. We need allies. From where I stand, we can bargain with the Republic for a lot of these things, the allies being the sticking point. A few of us recall becoming Mandalore. That's a viable option in the long run. We are all Mandalorian trained. While I can't speak for certain for every single one of us brothers, there are many parts of the Mandalorian culture I take to heart, a commando officer pipped up. Obviously, there are others I can live without. Criff fair fights or taking on orders of magnitude more powerful, worthy opponents for the hell of it. A round of cheers met that declaration, and I let myself join them. I more than agreed with the sentiment. Letting the Republic fall right now is not in our best interest. That much is true. It's also true that we hold no allegiance to it. I don't find it in myself fighting and dying for the Republic of the goodness of my heart, an armor commander pointed out, and his words received broad agreement. We need to agree on our short to medium-term objectives, then hammer down a proper command structure. The hard truth is that some of us won't survive the coming days and weeks, I continued. First, we can't allow the Republic to fall, at least not in the short term. Do we have an agreement on that point? It was messy, crude voting, signaled by raising a hand. That was at least one thing we could all agree on. With the Republic down, the CIS and Sith would be able to focus on us, and we were in no shape to take on them by ourselves in the long run. Item the second, how do we keep the Republic from losing the war over the next couple of weeks? That was an issue. We simply couldn't do it by ourselves without risking the destruction of our army and the death of most of our brothers. Refugee and audacity. It kind of worked for us all so far, a Marine commander suggested. I feel neutral about the Jedi. Depending on how things turn out, they might be either allies or enemies. However, helping Yoda rescue them might win us a lot of goodwill. Further, I've been looking at the maps and talking with Commander Scipio. Geonosis can offer us a lot of opportunities, not the least of them being automated factories. If we capture and hold that world, we would not only deny it to the Sith, but take a first step toward ensuring we have our industrial base. Even if we can't hold Geonosis in the long run, we might be able to recover some of its industry and demolish the rest before pulling out. What's more, we know that the Confederate leadership will be there shortly. If we can take them out, we will neutralize many of Sidious's supporters on that side of the war. Doing so should throw the CIS in disarray, buying us time to negotiate with the Republic and seek other alternatives, Scipio suggested. Those are good ideas worth discussing. The same goes for a potential Mandalorian gambit, I agreed aloud. Other options. My brothers raised many options, including ones trying to sidestep the Republic and Senate as a whole and attempt to cut a deal with factions within the Republic. The issue with many of those was that we would be playing straight in the politicians' hands, fighting on their battlefield, using their rules. I was against such an outcome if it could be avoided for the time being. The discussions would continue long into the night, and only reach hasty, imperfect conclusions when two facts ensured we ran out of time. The first was a confirmation from our medical specialists that controlled chips were a thing, and we had to get them out ASAP. That revelation by itself was enough to derail all discussions until most of us could calm down. It also put our situation in a different light. We would need the Jedi as allies until we can utilize them against Sidious. The second was that pickets deployed towards the Rishi Maze detected the approach of a Republic consular frigate. Yoda was on his way. We're out of time, brothers. We have to vote to conclude, then get a command structure in place before Yoda arrives. We have a few hours at most. What are our objectives? =VW=. If you want to support my writing or discuss this story, see the following links. Pat Rayon, Delkatar's Writing Corner. The Space Battles Forums. This is where most discussion over my stories takes place. The Sufficient Velocity Forums. 2 Chapter 1 Parts. Disclaimer, I don't own any of the Star Wars movies, TV series, games, books, or comics. They belong to Disney or their respective copyright owners. Chapter 1 =VW=. Part 1 =VW=. Republic Consular Cruiser Dawn. En route to Kamino. The Force was in flux. It shifted from lighter shades of gray to depressing, all-consuming darkness before lighting up with sparks of hope. If Yoda didn't know better, and he honestly didn't, the Force was trying to tie itself up in a pulsating knot of possibilities, awaiting resolution. The ancient Jedi shifted in the oversized chair he sat into. His long ears twitched twice, and he drew himself back into meditation. The ship would arrive at Kamino soon, and through the Force it felt like they were racing towards destiny. That wasn't far from the truth. The present circumstances left Yoda little acceptable choice but to hurry up. He had to gain the army Obi-Wan warned them about, if for no other reason, to ensure no one else did it so they could misuse it. Yoda hoped he wouldn't have to use the clone soldiers. Doing so would be a failure and a loss, yet what else could he do under the circumstances? The Republic, no, the whole galaxy, raced towards war. Only a thin line of Jedi stood against the coming darkness on Geonosis. Yoda felt it in his old bones. The odds of a peaceful resolution there were slim. There would be no successful negotiations with Dooku, even if the fallen Jedi was inclined to allow any in the first place. Cut the head of the serpent, and hope that the body dies. That was the Jedi's last desperate shot at derailing the coming war. However, the sad truth was that, without the secret clone army, the Confederacy had an overwhelming military advantage compared to the Republic. They didn't need to negotiate from anything but a position of strength if they wanted to negotiate in the first place. It was just that the bulk of the Senate was safe and sound on Coruscant, so they didn't see it that way. The Republic had been the uncontested power in the galaxy for too long. It brought an unprecedented age of peace and prosperity. It was a hard truth to swallow that the Senate went and wasted it all with a series of unwise, if not outright foolish decisions. To murky the waters even more now, as he was about to potentially start the war he was trying to avoid, Yoda wasn't sure how powerful the Confederacy was. Republic intelligence had conflicting data and wildly varying estimates from different analysts. The Jedi's efforts in that regard offered no better results. Sadly, sheer arrogance and core-centrism were to blame in that regard. Yoda's ears drooped as his race towards destiny came to a rapid halt. Master Yoda, we're out of lightspeed. Local defense ships are hailing us. By the Force, there are a lot of them and they're big mothers. That much fit. The secret Republic army would be of no use without a navy to transport it and fight in space. Yoda perked up, quickly shaking off the last vestiges of his uneasy meditation. Master Yoda, we've got an approach vector towards Tipoca City, apparently the capital. Local dignitaries are expecting your arrival, the captain announced. Yoda removed a small communicator from his belt and thanked the man. 20 minutes later, the frigate landed in a large shadowed dock. The airlock hissed open, and a silver ramp descended, forming a stairway down. The Force kept dancing between the light and darkness, which was far from reassuring, Yoda decided as he slowly made his way down. He looked around, seeing not a single one of the tall, aquatic locals. There were just several not particularly tall humans wearing green, blue, and gray uniforms, respectively. Master Yoda, it's an honor to meet you, the human in the center announced with a hint of genuine feelings hiding something odd. The other two identical men followed suit, the only difference being their distinct feelings. The one in brown was wary, and the one in blue giddy, almost as if meeting a celebrity. I am General Green. My brothers are Commanders Scipio and Boss, the clone introduced his compatriots. Greetings, Yoda said and nodded at the soldiers. Prime Minister Lama Su hoped to meet. I did, either him or members of his government. I'm afraid that the Prime Minister is indisposed, General Green shrugged, showing no trace of feeling apologetic. In fact, Yoda could glean a profound sense of satisfaction coming from the three clones. His successor I must meet. Urgent business we have, Yoda said. The Jedi didn't sense any danger coming from the humans. Yet with every passing moment, the foreboding feeling of something being wrong here grew more and more. His successor is unavailable. I think she's in a detention cell close to that of the unlamented Prime Minister, Commander Scipio explained. Yoda was liking this turn of events less and less. What did you do? He asked lightly while submerging himself in the Force. It shook with anticipation. The knot of possibilities tightened even further. We grasped our freedom, Master Yoda. We are no longer slaves of the clone masters of Kamino. General Green spoke plainly. The Force's dance reached a crescendo. Light shone brightly, chasing away the darkness, only for deeper shadows to rise and swallow it until everything was pitch black. Sparks of hope burst forth, burning away the shadows, and the cycle continued. Yoda sighed, part in dread, part in relief. There was nothing moral or good in using a slave army, no matter how desperate you were. Yet both the Republic and the Jedi needed an army, right now. The consequences of failing to procure it didn't bear thinking about. The picture the Force was trying to show the Jedi Master became a bit clearer. So this was the heart of the knot, Yoda decided. It all hung on the outcome of this meeting. Negotiate we will, Yoda nodded firmly. This was going to be perhaps the most important negotiations in his life, if not necessarily the most difficult. Then follow us, Master Yoda. We need to show you something, and we can talk on the way there. General Green turned and waved at the Jedi to follow. By doing so, he revealed a small patch of missing hair and a small bacta patch covering it. More curiously, the other two clones had the same visible signs of injury on their heads as well, in the same place too. Yoda narrowed his eyes at that. He didn't need the Force's prompting to figure out that what he just saw was of particular importance. Tell us, Master Jedi, why do you need our services and for what? General Green asked as he slowly walked towards the hangar's exit. That was both undiplomatic and a demonstration that the human didn't fear either the Jedi or what Yoda represented. Perhaps a hint that right now, the Republic needed this army more than it needed the Republic. Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker held prisoners are. The Confederacy Senator Amidala has. Execute them they will. That might be a thorny political problem for the Republic, and a tragedy in the case of your young senator, Commander Scipio nodded. With due respect, Master Jedi, that is also a Republic problem, not ours, Commander Boss added politely. Master Jedi, I must ask, what were your people doing when the Confederacy captured them? I'm assuming it is the Confederacy, yes, and not another hostile party. General Green slowed down and looked at Yoda. Follow up an assassin Obi-Wan did. Went to rescue his master, young Skywalker did, Yoda explained. By assassin, I would assume you mean Jango Fett, one of our trainers. We're aware he has been taking side assignments to keep himself in shape, or so he claimed. Boss provided some context. The Mandalorian was a mercenary, so what the clone just said might very well be the truth as he knew it, Yoda decided. Some of us had kept up with galactic news. Someone doesn't like Senator Amidala, almost certainly members of the Confederacy's leadership. How did she end up in their hands? The general inquired. With Skywalker she is, her protector he is, Yoda admitted. He needed to have words with the young man about what to do and not do when acting as a bodyguard. Going to rescue Obi-Wan was one thing. Bringing Senator Amidala along was another, and the only reason the Jedi knew about the two of them was because of a Republic intelligence agent on Geonosis getting out a message. The clones shared pointed looks at that admissions, but let it go. Master Yoda, you're aware that if we go and attempt a rescue mission, it could be considered an act of war. That's an issue for us because right now we're obviously not the slave army you came here to take command of, General Green stated bluntly. We don't feel like potentially being used to get your people and then disavowed by the Republic. Execute my Jedi, the Confederacy will. Murder a Republic senator, their leaders will. War is about to begin. A rescue Jedi force will attempt. Military assistance they will need, afraid I am. War is coming for us all. Then the objective is to recover your Jedi and missing senator, Commander Scipio noted. If you need an army for it when you've sent a bunch of Jedi there, Master Yoda, then you expect heavy resistance. What are we looking at? Unknown but large number of droids. Confederate Navy elements, local forces. All unknown numbers? Boss asked. Yoda nodded once and lowered his head. His ears drooped. He didn't have solid numbers beyond the vague large and was aware that this simple fact wasn't helping his case. Nevertheless, that was all his contacts among Republic intelligence were able to provide on short notice. That state of affairs was less than ideal. So that's what you want, Master Yoda. We might be willing to assist you, at least for a single campaign against Geonosis with limited military goals. What can you and the Republic offer us in exchange? General Green asked as they reached the exit, where a sleek transport waited for them. Equals VW equals. Part 2. Equals VW equals. Tipoca City. Kamino. Yoda's mind raced during the short flight to a nearby medical facility. There, the three clones led him past long lines of their brothers waiting for some kind of treatment. As I said, before you give us an offer, you need to see something, Master Yoda. That way you can properly comprehend our position towards the Republic and the reason one of your kind had us created, Green stated in a grave tone. They soon reached an observation window looking into an operating room, where clone medics and medical droids were busy performing brain surgery on clones. Just watch, Green said in barely contained anger. There were 3 operations in progress within the theater. At the far right, a droid was busy sealing a small cut. At the far left, a medic finished removing a patch of hair from his patient before applying antiseptic. It was the operation in the middle that gave Yoda insight. The Jedi didn't like what he saw at all. The doctors carefully removed a piece of skull and slowly worked on the brain of their patient until they took out a small patch of bloody matter. One of them put it into a jar full of a clear solution, then walked toward the window and showed it for the Jedi to see. While Yoda was no brain surgeon, he knew more than enough about medicine to know for sure that the thin orange membrane on display had no business being within a human brain. Behavior modification chips. With the right order, they can rob us of our free will, Commander Scipio explained. We obviously had ours removed before your arrival, Master Yoda. What you see is what your Republic did to us. For all we know, it what the Jedi who bargained for our creation wished. Yoda wanted to hotly deny those accusations, however. He was sure that such words would fall on deaf ears. Knew of this I did not. Approve of such abomination I do not, Yoda told the truth. Someone within the Republic, perhaps even within your order does, Master Yoda, General Green pointed out. Investigate I will, Yoda vowed. He was going to get to the bottom of this outrage against sapient life. Your aid we still require. Then make an offer. A good one, Master Yoda, Commander Scipio suggested. The Jedi had been thinking about all the assets the Order had. They were much vaster than one could expect due to a combination of tax exemptions, donations, Republic funding, the money coming from various patents, and the profit that came from several of the service corps run by the Jedi. While those funds weren't enough to outright buy an army, they might be sufficient to hire one temporarily until they could negotiate a more permanent and tenable solution. As importantly, both the Jedi and the Republic sorely needed to win some goodwill with the clones if they were to work together in the future. Yoda's opening bid was a large number, though not as high as he could afford to go. The clones looked at each other, sharing a silent conversation. We might be willing to deploy some assets at that price, however. We can't promise a success if we rely sorely on them, Master Yoda, General Green haggled. And to be frank, I am not keen on dispatching fewer assets than I'm confident would be enough to get the job done. Doing so would get many of my brothers killed for no gain. It was both a cynical and understandable point that the clone made, Yoda decided. That's true, negotiating with the Senate hard will be. Prove your skills you must. The better deal you'll get. Vouch for you the Jedi will. A public endorsement by the Jedi might be useful, that much is true, Boss agreed. They retired to a conference room in a nearby building, where the haggling continued for a few more hours. Eventually, under the pressure of time, an agreement was struck. The Jedi would hire the clone army for a campaign against Geonosis. They would also facilitate introductions and negotiations with Republic politicians in particular, and the Senate in general. In exchange, the clones were going to do their damn best to get the Jedi out of the mess they created on Geonosis, and try to nip the coming war in the bud by capturing the Confederate leadership present on Geonosis and neutralizing as much of their military assets in the system as feasible. While a few clones with legal training were busy drawing up the relevant contracts, General Green led Master Yoda to one of the command centers, where his staff was already busy planning an incursion against Geonosis. Yoda's ears twitched at seeing the work in progress, and he pointedly looked up at the general. Operations such as the one you require don't materialize from thin air. We're going to rely on too much improvisation for my taste anyway, Master Yoda. Now please brief us on everything you know about the enemy disposition, the assets we need to recover, and anything else we need to know. Like potential friendly assets you might have called into aid in extracting your Jedi. At that, Yoda had to revisit his estimate of the general upward. Called a few favors we did, the Jedi Master admitted. Time permitting, the Loke Revenants aid us might. The Trade Federation their enemy is, Yoda continued. The mere resistance might make it, the Force willing. Those are pirate bands, Commander Scipio blandly pointed out. If they're willing to work with us, then I suggest that you and your boys try your best not to shoot at them on general principle, the general suggested with a smirk. At least they might give the enemy more targets to shoot at, the commander grumbled, obviously displeased by the idea of working with pirates. To be fair, what the Jedi did was simply contact as many of the active enemies of the Trade Federation they knew of, and try to aim them at Geonosis at the same time. =VW=. If you want to support my writing or discuss this story, see the following links. Pat Rayon, Delkatar's Writing Corner. The Space Battles Forums. This is where most discussion over my stories takes place. The Sufficient Velocity Forums. 3 Chapter 1 Parts 3 and 4. Disclaimer, I don't own any of the Star Wars movies, TV series, games, books, or comics. They belong to Disney or their respective copyright owners. Chapter 1 equals VW equals. Part 3 equals VW equals. Fleet Admiral Scipio. Venator Cruiser Thunderstorm. TF and Terry's flagship. En route to Geonosis. As a freshly promoted fleet admiral, I was glad there were no Jedi on my ship, ready to breathe in my neck and try to question my authority. That dubious honor belonged to General Green, who, along with his other duties, had to keep Master Yoda from doing something particularly Jedi-like. I didn't envy the poor bastard. Admiral, we're 5 mics out of Geonosis, the navigator reminded me. Well, this was it. It was time to put up and prove we knew what the criff we were doing or die. Captain, get us to battle stations, I told my former second-in-command, Frank. I'll be in the sorry excuse we've got for a flag bridge. I nodded at my brother and gave one last look at the swirling colors of hyperspace. Sadly, we didn't have the time or facilities to do anything about the great vulnerable bridges of our ships. Action stations, this is not a drill. Set condition 1 throughout the ship. Make sure your damn armors are on, your helms sealed, and magnetic clamps active. That said, it wasn't like we couldn't take some precautions against the bridge or outer compartments getting breached. We all wore surplus armor, complete with life support and magnetic boots. I headed to the elevator and a much better protected command center that would allow me to exercise a modicum of control over the coming battle, while the crew raced to make a final checkup on all vital systems and their survival gear. We were 2 minutes out when I entered the flag bridge, cutting it too close. My small staff was ready, a handful of tactical officers, sensor operators, and several communications specialists. I took my seat at a round table built around a relatively small hollow tank, strapped myself in just in case, and brought up the controls for the tactical display. We're leaving lightspeed in 10 seconds. Brace for combat, the captain announced. I didn't feel the transition. The only sign that we were back in real space was the rapid work of the sensor operators, who struggled to get me a picture of the battlefield. Light flashed above the holotank, showing our formation. It resembled a flattened arrowhead, led by a handful of Venator Star Destroyers. 2 battle groups of Acclamator carriers hybrids anchored the center. 3 divisions of venerable dreadnought cruisers flanked them, and in turn, a ring of escorts surrounded them. Launch small craft and send a spread of sensor probes at the asteroid belt. The fleet will advance at 1/3 standard acceleration, I ordered. We were moving at a vector that would allow us to slash downwards, scything above the asteroid belt and reaching 00 intercept with the planet. There were no troop carriers in my task force, just crew and reinforced marine details in case of hostile boarders. Green and Yoda were a few minutes behind, intentionally moving slower through hyperspace. Is the beacon ready? I asked. Dawn reports ready. A single Corellian corvette flew in the shadow of the thunderstorm. That ship had a skeleton crew and carried a custom-built hyperspace beacon. We had to strip a lot of long-range communication stations on Kamino for parts, which was a win-win situation. Doing so significantly reduced the locations that someone could use to tell on us. We've got pings from the asteroid belt. There's a lot of metal hiding there, mostly smaller ships, and now we've got active sensor sweeps. Droid fighters are going after the probes, one of the sensor operators reported. On the tactical display, a probe winked out, then a second one. A reconnaissance squadron came out of the asteroid belt to take a good look at what was about to ruin their day. I am not sure what exactly was supposed to happen during the original timeline. However, one thing was certain. OTL, Yoda took only the freshly activated mothball fleet meant for the Fett clones and was able to win, along with whatever pirate reinforcements might have shown up. This time around, we brought almost every single ship from Kamino's defense fleet with us. Send recon squadrons 1 through 3 to intercept the droids. Launch the second spread of probes as soon as they engage the enemy. Weapons, target the detected enemy ships with long-range missiles and fire as soon as you have a solid lock. Soon, assault concussion missiles streaked from my acclamators heading towards the asteroid field. Meanwhile, the scouts reached the droid fighters, which kept heading towards the fleet at a suicidal burn of their engines. Whoever was in charge on the other side was more than willing to sacrifice the droids to attempt to burn through the heavy jamming employed by my task force. That way, they could figure out exactly what they had to deal with. My scouts decelerated shortly before reaching the effective engagement range of their craft. Within seconds, it was all over. The enemy squadron blinked out of existence on the tactical plot, joined by 2 of my brethren. Just like that, they were gone, erased from existence. I had to suppress a surge of anger, something I didn't need impairing my judgment. The forward scouts hit their afterburners. Instead of heading back to the safety of the fleet, they headed towards the asteroid belt moments before the first missiles and second round of probes hit it. The sensor operators soon updated the holotank with fresh sensor data. Missile launches detected, sensors reported. Multiple red tracks appeared from among the asteroids heading our way. Launch platforms located Lupus missile frigates, counting 34 plus. 2 lines of angry crimson symbols appeared within the asteroids. Mark their locations, I ordered and switched on the fleet-wide channel. This is Antares Actual. Does everyone have the first set of jump coordinates locked down? If not, get them in place. The fleet will jump at my mark. Small craft, break away now and hit the afterburners to overtake us. I counted silently while watching the incoming missile tracks. It was a very rare occasion for 2 mobile forces to exchange long-range missile fire in this galaxy. Unless one side was bound to protect a stationary target, they simply didn't have to wait around for the enemy warheads to reach them, as we were about to demonstrate. In contrast, those Lupus frigates would be unable to enter lightspeed before exiting from the asteroid field. As soon as the weapons officers are sure there are no friendly ships in the way, saturate the enemy positions, I ordered. Just a few more seconds. Mark! I hear myself bark. Seconds before the enemy salvo could reach us, we entered hyperspace for a moment. By using one of the slowest settings our hyperdrives were able to operate at, we jumped past the enemy salvo. Then we returned to real space in a ragged formation. As soon as the tactical plot updated, I could see scores of missiles and heavy proton torpedoes racing towards the enemy frigates, which were trying to use asteroids for cover. Behind us, our small craft accelerated for all they were worth to catch up. 2 sensor probes made it past the asteroids. We've got incoming fighters from the surface. Good, every one of those that comes at us won't be available to bother our brothers in the ground forces, I noted aloud. We did have 2/3 of all available escorts with us for a reason after all. Staggered series of explosions lit up the asteroid field. Thin-skinned transport ships died, soon followed by more and more Lupus frigates. The firepower we unleashed against them was more than sufficient to shatter an asteroid they tried to hide behind. In comparison to proper capital ships, those death traps were as a matter of course unable to handle solid chunks of rock blasted apart in a shotgun-like effect. A second, smaller but guided salvo blew up the remaining frigates before they could respond. Decelerate 20% for 1 minute and straighten up the formation. We've got incoming fighters. I want interlocking fields of fire ready to meet them. I frowned at the scouts racing through the asteroid field. Pull back those scouts and send more sensor probes. ETA of the assault fleet. 4 minutes and counting, Admiral. That was more than enough time to draw in most ready to launch enemy fighters. Equals VW equals. Part 4. Equals VW equals. Fleet Admiral Scipio. Venator Cruiser Thunderstorm. TF and Terry's flagship. Genosis. The few Torrent squadrons we got from KDF were the first to catch up with us. Along with two Y-Wing bomber squadrons that were stationed on this very ship, the Torrents were the pride and joy of the Capital Squadron. They significantly outclassed all other small craft we had available for this battle. They were, of course, meant to protect the clone masters themselves, not keep my brothers alive. Instead, we would have to do with venerable Z-29 Skyhawks, dating to the High Republic era and various LA-AT gunship variants. I knew that soon after the war began OTL, things would have changed for the better. Nevertheless, that was a cold comfort today. The good news was that the Z-29 were modernized, so they weren't quite the death traps one might expect. At any rate, they weren't something I would feel comfortable throwing against a swarm of droid fighters on the best of days, much less when their pilots were all my brothers. Instead of sending them ahead to break up and soften the incoming enemy small craft, the Z-29 squadrons fell into formation as soon as they caught up. Their job was to pounce on any enemy fighters that broke through the escort's flak screen. On the bright side, it was clear that whoever was in charge on the other side either panicked or was simply inexperienced. The enemy fighters didn't wait to form into a single massive swarm before hitting us, which would have been unpleasant. Instead, they came at us as a long stream of 3 to 5 squadrons. If the droids kept their current timetable, they would hit us in multiple waves, giving us up to a minute or so to handle each one of them. Admiral, we're detecting a lot of metal on the edge of the probe's sensor range, a sensors operator informed me. A moment later, a sector of the asteroid field to our right lit up in orange. Send the remaining probes that way, I told him, and returned my attention to dealing with the swarm. Torrent squadrons are to slow down and hold position at the back of the fleet. I want you ready to break up the center of the enemy swarm using your missiles. In 5 minutes, you'll advance in a pincer maneuver, using the bulk of the fleet to screen your approach. After issuing the last string of orders, I wanted the enemy to reach us. Time crawled painfully slowly while the swarm of red dots came at us. When the time was right, I unveiled my next surprise. Execute garrote, I ordered. The fleet decelerated sharply, and the escorts at the front turned in the last moment, opening their broadsides to rake the incoming droid fighters both before and after they reached them. VW equals CT-331 Zeta Skyhawk Squadron. Bursts of multicolored light flashed over my fighter's cockpit, bringing back memories. I remember fighting against impossible odds in space in a past life I wasn't sure was real. In that life, we were physically outclassed by the enemy pilots. They also had machines with much better performance than ours. As if that wasn't bad enough, they could neutralize our greatest advantage. Said advantage was our network warfare-centered doctrine that turned us, pilots, into the next best thing to hive-mind fighting against individuals. Heavy jamming ensured that we couldn't be using properly networked machines. That was a moot point anyway. In this universe, no one risked being hacked without the enemy having physical access to their hardware, which meant no proper networking for military hardware. Fortunately, even if Z-29 were outdated, the technological disparity was nowhere near what we were accustomed to fighting against. Even better, despite facing machines this time, we were the better pilots. Unfortunately, the AA fire coming from our ships was once again less than impressive in neutralizing the enemy. This time around, more guns were fired at the approaching droids than in any battle I remembered participating in a past life. It was very impressive to look at. Laser cannons and the odd missile streaked forward at the approaching droids. Explosions blossomed, creating an impressive pyrotechnic display. The enemy kept coming, absorbing casualties, and despite my expectations, the first wave broke through, only to meet my fellow pilots covering the forward sector of the fleet. My squadron kept formation. We slowly flew right above the tall, exposed bridge of the acclamator carrier Distant Stars, our barn, which we had to keep in one piece no matter what. The second wave of enemy fighters broke through the escort screen, joining the furball happening at the pointed tip of the fleet's formation. 2 Skyhawk squadrons broke from covering the dreadnoughts and joined the fray, making it even more chaotic. My brothers were dying, yet the best thing I could do was hold my current position and bide my time. That was an incredibly frustrating sensation, even if the fact of the matter was, the longer this kept up, the better my odds of surviving the battle. The third wave focused on the escorts on the tip of the spear, crippling 2 of them before heading our way. Zeta 1, Mother, the CAG's voice sounded in my helmet. You've got customers, go service them. Dagger Squadron will take your position. Good hunting. Mother, Zeta 1 will make them feel properly welcomed. Zeta 1 to all Zeta elements, we've got boogies incoming. Keep your heads cool, watch your wingmen, and may the Force be with you. My Skyhawk's engines howled in anticipation. I opened the throttle and headed forth. My HUD lit up with targeting data and acknowledgements from my squadron. Zev, my wingman, fell in formation to my right as the squadron divided into pairs, and we went hunting. Those were vultures all right. The Z-29 sensor suite lit them up, and a small window opened in the corner of my HUD displaying information on the target from the war book. I took the lead, going low and opened fire with the rapid-fire laser cannons that were the Skyhawk's signature weapons. Zev went above, in an attempt to confuse the not particularly bright droid fighters. Behind us, the barn opened up with her AA guns as well, and bright explosions blossomed around the incoming vultures. The game of chicken lasted mere moments, and I howled in glee when my shots walked sideways over an approaching vulture, tearing it apart. This was it. My HUD flashed me a warning, and I hit my reverse thrusters. The inertial dampeners struggled to counteract the more than enough gravities of acceleration to kill me, and my Skyhawk twisted around its axis. Now my fighter's nose pointed back towards the barn while it kept flying towards Geonosis. I hit the afterburners, quickly bleeding off speed. As soon as I could, I opened fire at the back of a pair of vultures that flew through our formation unmolested. My shots caught the closer one in the right pod, shearing it off and sending it to tumble out of control. Zev blew up the second target, just in time for my HUD to flash in a warning. The next wave broke through the crippled escort screen easier and faster than anticipated. It came straight at us. We had just enough time to turn around and face them. Unfortunately, the bastards caught us in a bad position after we just bled off too much speed. I heard Zev scream and saw the small icon representing his fighter go dark. There was not much I could do besides shoot at the approaching bastards and scream my defiance at them. My laser bolt struck one right on the nose, turning it into a short-lived ball of fire. There was fire, light, and something searing hot sliced through me. VW equals Fleet Admiral Scipio Venator Cruiser, Thunderstorm TF Antares flagship Geonosis. The Torrent Squadron saved a lot of lives. The pincer maneuver and the 6 concussion missiles every single one of them carried annihilated one assault wave. After blowing through the center of the swarm, they turned around and struck another wave from 2 sides, taking out half the vultures without allowing the droids to react due to their respective attack vectors. This was it. Push the remaining escorts forward, pull the Skyhawk squadrons back to reform, then have them reinforce the line. Dreadnoughts, move towards the center of our line and form a phalanx formation. Then open your broadsides. Acclamators and venators fall back and reform into a wall formation. I wasted no time and used the respite that the torrents bought us. The remaining enemy fighters had to fly through multiple walls of fire to reach the real prize, my capital ships. The few that made it had Skyhawks and torrents hot on their heels and lacked the firepower to threaten my wall of battle. As if the universe had been waiting to prove me wrong, one of the last vultures managed to desperate weave through a wall of AA fire. A pursuing Skyhawk clipped its engines and sent it spinning right into the bridge tower of one of my acclamator carriers. And just like that, it was over. There were no more enemies left between us and Geonosis. Get the torrents rearmed? I shook myself and took stock on the tactical situation. Send the beacon forward and push 3rd Dreadnought Division towards its sector to keep it clear on unpleasant surprises. The rest of the fleet will reform into a phalanx formation and head for those Lucrehulk transports. The last probes hit the jackpot. In that sector alone, I could count at least 2 dozen heavy transports, if not larger prizes, refitted battleship equivalents. They were all in parking orbit without their ship cores. Those ships were extremely vulnerable without the spherical cores holding their primary reactors. And don't forget to dispatch SAR teams. Live or dead, bring our brothers back. Even as I spoke, Dawn's blue icon vanished only to Reaper above Geonosis a heartbeat later. Moments later, that whole region of space lit up with friendly IFFs and icons. The assault fleet was in place, and it wasted no time heading planetside. VW equals. If you want to support my writing or discuss this story, see the following links. Pat Rayon, Delkatar's writing corner. The Space Battles forums. This is where most discussion over my stories takes place. The Sufficient Velocity forums. For Chapter 1, Parts 5 and 6. Disclaimer, I don't own any of the Star Wars movies, TV series, games, books, or comics. They belong to Disney or their respective copyright owners. Chapter 1 equals VW equals. Part 5 equals VW equals. Hangar Bay. Acclamator assault ship Aiken. Low orbit above Geonosis. Yoda stood within a heavily armed gunship, surrounded by heavy-armed clones busy checking up their gear. Outside, he could see the familiar forms of old Skyhawk fighters, which hearkened to better, brighter times. The Force kept surging, twisting between utter darkness and bursting gems of hope, all shrouded by shifting shadows. A shrill alarm sounded, gaining everyone's attention. Launch sequence is now authorized. I say again, launch sequence is now authorized. It was about time. Yoda could sense friends and former students dying down there, people he knew their whole lives. The clones sharing the same transport with the Jedi strapped in, and its doors folded, giving him a glimpse of rising Skyhawk squadrons. The LAAT rose with the distinct whine of repulsors, then its primary engines kicked in, accelerating it out of the acclamator. A small hollow emitter came online, showing the descending swarm of small craft, courtesy of this being a command variant of the assault transport. A solid block of LAATs headed towards the arena where the Jedi were, escorted by Skyhawk squadrons. Small groups peeled off soon after they went past the upper atmosphere, going after critical targets that weren't feasible to be struck from orbit, like power plants and logistic centers too close to various settlements. Dedicated military installations were not so fortunate. On the way down, the acclamators shot at anything suspicious that wasn't right in the middle of a populated center, making Yoda feel torn on the matter. Like a Jedi and peacekeeper, he should be against any orbital bombardment. Legally and practically, any such constraints meant that there would be no army ridding to the rescue of his Jedi, and no chance to end this abominable war before it could truly begin. Two arrowhead formations quickly overtook the descending transports, heading towards the arena. Yoda spent a few seconds fiddling with the hollow projector's controls until he could figure out what they were. Gold Squadron, Torrent fighters led the way, closely followed by Bastion Squadron Y-Wing bombers. The lead Skyhawk squadrons accelerated, pulled ahead, and joined the newer small craft. Yoda zoomed out the tactical map projected in front of him, and it lit up with angry red targets. Anti-air emplacements, droid columns streaming into the arena, tanks, and various assorted military vehicles. Missiles and laser fire streaked up, only to be met by jamming, decoy, and return fire. The red symbols blinked out one after another along with the odd Skyhawk. A Torrent vanished, followed by a bomber glowing amber and breaking out of its attack run. Then the remaining Y-Wings flew over the arena. For a moment, Yoda feared the worst. Equals VW equals. Geonosis arena with practice ease born of years of experience, Count Dooku suppressed his glee, letting none of it show. Instead, he kept projecting the image of a somber statesman. My friends, I implore you one last time, surrender. Let us end this madness. I guarantee that you will all be treated well. The Jedi could serve as bargaining chips, and it would be even better if he could turn a few of them. Otherwise, they would serve as well dead and out of the way. Either way, most of the survivors wouldn't be in a position to meddle in the Sith's plans, which were unfolded as foreseen. Yoda took the bait as expected, and now the war was not only inevitable, but the Confederacy could gleefully blame it on Republic aggression in their propaganda. Hundreds of droids of all stripes surrounded the few remaining Jedi. Dooku felt like shaking his head at their arrogance. Did his former brothers and sisters believe that they could piece the local orbital defenses without being noticed? In their arrogance, all the Jedi did was to act according to the Sith's plans, living up to their admittedly low expectations. Dooku waited for an answer, savoring the anticipation when the Force whispered an urgent warning, and he frowned. The Sith looked up and saw many quickly approaching dots, with some coming much faster than the others. He paid no heed to the Jedi's cries of suicidal defiance. Get into the tunnels now. We've got an incoming air raid. Dooku snapped even as defensive emplacements near the arena opened fire only to be silenced by missile and torpedo strikes. Urged by the Force, Dooku left dignity behind and ran, followed by some of the Confederacy's leaders, while others milled around in confusion. It was a good thing that most of them ran as soon as the Jedi revealed themselves, Dooku decides. It was another good thing that he heeded the Force's warning because seconds later, the world crashed down as explosions rippled over the stands, tearing dozens of droids apart. VW equals. Mace Windu was ready to die. That was a fair price to pay for a failure of this magnitude, and the war it would bring, he guessed. Now all the Jedi who came with him could do was fight, die, and deny the enemy hostages to use against the Republic. His only regrets were that the Republic he loved would have to endure the inevitable war, and that his friends and comrades had to die in failure. Dooku, we will never surrender. We will not be used against the Republic, Mace declared his defiance. The small cluster of surviving Jedi rose their lightsabers and prepared to meet their end. Then the oddest thing happened. Instead of gloating or ordering their death, Dooku ran. Windu stared at the stands in incomprehension and saw a few Confederate dignitaries follow suit, while Gunray and his Neimoidians milled around in confusion. The Jedi saw something from the corner of his eye. Before his brain could process what Mace saw, the stands blew up in bright, rippling explosions that demolished most of the droids that had the high ground. Some of the war machines opened fire on the Jedi, while others either looked in confusion or turned their weapons up. The incoming fire was ragged and just low enough in volume for the surviving Jedi to handle. That allowed Windu to dare a glance to the skies, which confirmed his suspicion. Master Yoda went and got them then. Fighters and bombers roared over the arena, finishing their attack run, followed by heavily armed gunships. Rocked pods howled like damned souls, and more explosions rippled over the stands, utterly demolishing them and any surviving droids there. The gunships quickly slowed down until they hung over the arena at a sharp angle. Their armored noses pointed down, along with most of their weapons. Heavy repeaters, E-webs, and laser cannons simply shredded the droids in the arena surrounding the Jedi. The incoming enemy fire slackened to nothing, and the gunships focused on the tunnels, collapsing them one after another. At that point, LAATs in troop transport configuration arrived and descended into the arena. Their sides opened, revealing armored soldiers and the grim-faced Master Yoda. Mace could feel and almost hear the remaining Jedi cheer at the rescue. All he could feel was a dull sense of relief. He didn't get them all killed after all. "Pick up your wounded and get on board. We don't have a whole day," one of the soldiers shouted, and his amplified voice carried over the sound of the still firing gunships. Those words shook Windu of his brief stupor, and he barked orders to the survivors. Soon everyone boarded a transport, and Mace spent a moment to ensure no one was left behind before joining Yoda. The LAATs rose, escorted by gunships and squadrons of venerable fighters. Above the large forms tore their way through the sky, descending rapidly. VW equals. Part 6. VW equals. LAAT transport. Genosis. You brought them, Mace noted to Master Yoda, who looked anything but pleased at the situation at hand. Complications arose. Hired them I did, Yoda said. Count Dooku escape must not. Rally more systems to his cause he could. The LAAT shook as the pilot pulled it into a steep dive to avoid bursts of red laser bolts rising from a plateau below them. A large ship descending above them returned fire, comprehensively shattering the whole plateau. The resulting shock wave buffered the transports, forcing everyone inside to hold onto something. They flew around dagger-like rock spires rising high into the air, and towards a huge open plain. Multiple assault ships were busy landing in front of them, while various smaller transports darted between them, touching down for only as long as it took their cargo of men, material, or war machines to disembark. Mace noted that those forward-deployed troops weren't even trying to advance. Instead, they were setting up defensive positions. Engineers quickly set up charges and ran away, blasting shallow trenches, which were soon filled by troopers. Others deployed small shield generators to protect what suspiciously looked like supply dumps. "Pilot, get us down to that assembly area. We need to pick up the offensive and take out those ships." Windu pointed at the scores of landed Confederate transports clearly visible in the distance, around with countless droids swarming below them. "It's your funeral, Jedi." The pilot shrugged and flew towards the assembly area. "Command authority we have not. Yoda chose that moment to point out that critical detail. "Why not?" Mace exclaimed. "The clone master's reach exceeded their grasp, took over the clones did, a bargain we struck," Yoda explained in his typical way. "Damn right we did," one of the clones muttered just loud enough to be heard. They soon landed, and Mace saw various Jedi waving at platoons to follow them, only for the clones to look at each other and shake their heads. "Jedi, if you want a bloody live, get back and take cover," a sergeant shouted loud enough to be heard over the roar of countless landing craft. "If you want to charge a whole droid army alone in the open, be my guest. It's your funeral." Jedi looked at each other and back to the armored soldiers in confusion, unsure what was happening. "Master Windu, we've got several commando units ready to deploy. They can use Jedi assistance," a clone officer, distinguished by armor with yellow paint, announced. "As long as you follow their instructions and don't do something stupid that can get you all killed. Can you manage that?" "Soldier, what gave you the idea that we want to die or are suicidal?" Master Mundi carefully asked. "As soon as the first Jedi landed here, they tried to usurp command and charge the enemy over the open plain," came the dry response. "That's a great way to get yourselves, and more importantly, a bunch of my brothers killed, for no damn good reason. We need those ships taken out before they can leave," Mace pointed out. "We'll take a few out. The rest is up to the Navy. The last I checked, we're holding the orbitals, and currently there is no credible resistance left up there. Besides, as soon as they finish deploying troops, our acclamators will provide close air support. We'll advance under the cover of their guns and not a moment earlier. Now, are you going to aid the commandos or not?" Blinding rays of light caught Mace's attention. Large, unwieldy artillery platforms opened fire. Their beams scythed over the plain, slicing through countless droids. Missiles and heavy proton torpedoes detached from a few nearby assault ships with a deafening roar and flew over the plain. Some descended and struck what probably was larger groups of droids, while the others went for the distant ships. Windu wisely averted his gaze a heartbeat before multiple short-lived suns consumed Geonosis' red sands, boiling rock and turning it into glass. Techno-Union transports cracked like eggs struck by a hammer, while missiles pierced the thicker hide of core spheres, to detonate inside with devastating results. Soon all anyone could see was dull glows, and a wave of sand heading their way, thrown up by the immense explosions. VW equals Fleet Admiral Scipio Venator Cruiser, Thunderstorm. TF and Terry's flagship, Geonosis. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. I split the fleet into 2 equal parts and had them approach the parked enemy transports from above and below the asteroid ring, making it that much harder for them to break out and try fleeing in hyperspace. Most of them couldn't even try that with their core spheres on the surface. I kept my fighters and a few precious bombers as a reserve and let my heavy cannons do their work. The fleet kept a safe distance from the asteroids and unleashed barrage after barrage of turbolaser bolts, focusing on the targets trying to escape. When we blew up those, we went for the outer Lucrehulk sections. At that point, a few things happened in quick succession. "Admiral, we're receiving a hyperspace transmission on the frequency we provided Master Yoda. It's from a Captain Nim. He informed us that Kavin Toth's battle squadron is on the way to Geonosis, carrying WMDs ready for deployment. Nim is in pursuit with several fighters in tow." "I see. Maintain bombardment for as long we're in range. The fleet will advance to cover our landing forces. Get in contact with this Captain Nim, thank him for the warning, and request that he updates us on the enemy forces' composition. Toth apparently left a battle at Nod Katha and is heading our way with 3 Sabioth destroyers, at least 4 frigates, multiple fighters and bombers, along with at least 12 modified transports ready to use Hex. Contact General Green and apprise him of the situation. I want Gold Squadron moving to provide CAP against any leakers. Designate all enemy small craft as primary targets. Red and Silver squadrons will be on point, backed by at least a wing of Skyhawks." My fleet was still on the move to cover the landing sites when the tactical plot updated. "We've got new arrivals, reading at least 3 cruiser-class ships with escorts. Their approach vector was in our favor. It led straight into the asteroid belt, and if they tried to bypass it, they would run in half my fleet either way. This explained why I was unfamiliar with them from my memories. The newcomers came out of lightspeed too far out. Either Jedi fighters, the promised pirate reinforcements, or both should have been able to handle them OTL. Otherwise, I would remember the deployment of WMDs on Geonosis. This time around, they had to pass through us first. My fleet both outgunned and outnumbered them. Red and Silver squadrons are free to go. I want 3 Skyhawk squadrons kept as a reserve with each part of the fleet. The remaining Skyhawks are to advance and hunt down all enemy small craft with extreme prejudice. Admiral, we're in contact with Jedi Master Gallia, leading Zeta Squadron made of Delta fighters. They're leaving Geonosis to assist us. Have Gallia's unit form above the plane behind us alongside Gold Squadron. They're to take out anything that makes it past us. I would have liked to be certain that we would be able to shoot down all enemy small craft before they could come close to Geonosis. However, the performance of what passed for AA and point defense systems on my ships, and worse, the dedicated AA escorts, left much to be desired. My best bet was my fighters, and I had only 2 squadrons of modern machines. They hopefully would be a match for the enemy equivalents, which I could already see racing towards the planet. VW. If you want to support my writing or discuss this story, see the following places. Pat Rayon, Delkatar's Writing Corner. The Space Battles Forums. This is where most discussion over my stories takes place. The Sufficient Velocity Forums. 5 Chapter 1 Parts 7 and 8. Disclaimer, I don't own any of the Star Wars movies, TV series, games, books, or comics. They belong to Disney or their respective copyright owners. Chapter 1 VW. Part 7 VW. LAAT transport. Geonosis. Exhilaration, anger, and regret bubbled within Anakin's heart, making a heady cocktail of conflicting emotions. They were alive and racing to continue the fight, when just a couple of minutes ago, Skywalker had to struggle with the concept of utter failure and inevitable death staring him in the face. The emotions surged and ebbed through him, straining any control he had ever learned to the breaking point. They filled him with energy and made him hunger with anticipation of more combat, of getting even. That dream came to a screeching halt when instead of flying forward towards a roll of not-so-distant transport ships, their ride took a sharp turn to the right and rapidly descended, along a few more of the machines that came to their rescue. Anakin opened his mouth, but nothing came out due to the sheer disbelief. He could see through the open side door how more such machines, escorted by a few fighters, went straight for the enemy transports and opened fire at them with missiles and laser cannons. Then the transport turned too far, and all the young Jedi could see were scores of similar craft busy landing troops and equipment at a massive staging ground, flanked by at least 3 massive capital ships. Why are we running? We need to press the attack. Skywalker finally found his voice and spilled his indignation. One of the pilots turned his head around to look into the troop compartment. A painting of lizard eyes on top of his helmet seemingly glared straight into Anakin's soul. "It's you 3 fools," the pilot grunted with disdain. "It's because of your utter lack of common sense that countless of our brothers are going to die today. The least you can do is stay put, shut up, and not criff up this operation any more than it is." "This isn't our fault," Obi-Wan weakly protested. At that point, all clones in the transport, save for one of the pilots, turned to look at him. Despite the helmets, Anakin could feel their disdainful and accusing looks, even if they weren't aimed at him right now. That simply didn't feel right. "Bah, Jedi, they're still not thinking. Typical," one of the clones in the back grumbled. "At least you're no longer our problem," he added as the transport landed. Obi-Wan simply shook his head and waved at Anakin to follow him out. Skywalker slowed down just long enough to help Padme disembark, at which point the transport wasted no time in rising and heading back towards the battle. "That was exceptionally rude," Padme concluded aloud. "What are we supposed to do now, Master?" Anakin asked. He looked around, seeing several other Jedi milling around. A few of them were wounded and saw medics run their way. They were in a small rocky clearing surrounded by various prefabricated buildings or parts of such. VW. RC-117 Headhunter Alpha Squad, Geonosis. Awakening a few days ago as a clone of myself on Kamino of all places wasn't what I expected. Remembering 10 years of living stuck on that water hole was something I could go without. I could recall doing nothing while the so-called clone masters disposed of thousands of my brothers as if they were defective droids. I didn't say a word, much less did anything about it. That alone was more than enough to keep me high up on fury for a long time to come. That wasn't a good combination for a regular Force adept. For one who now had decades of horrors stuck in his head, horrors he committed as a Sith, well, it was a recipe for disaster. Ideally, we all would be getting months, if not years of downtime and therapy just over our latest lives as clones meant to fight and die for a cause that isn't ours. With everything else on top, it was a miracle we hadn't snapped already. I don't mean just the relative few of us who remembered being a crazy Sith Lord, but most of us. Unfortunately for everyone involved, proper mental care and recovery time was a luxury we couldn't afford for many reasons, the damn chips being a major one. The only bright side of this disaster in progress was that we got just enough time to remove the chips from all Force adepts among our brothers, my head included. After all, no one wanted to think what Sidious might do with an army of us at least equal to the average Jedi of this era, yet possessing orders of magnitude more combat experience than the best of them. He managed to ruin countless lives with access just to the original Jango clones. Hatred was a fragile bond. Unfortunately, we former Sith, and perhaps future Sith, found ourselves bound by it. May the Force help the galaxy if we couldn't unfuck our heads before we found a way to get Sidious very dead and stuck that way. Unsurprisingly, I found myself stuck with several thorny issues to deal with. For some odd reason, my Force adept brothers deemed me somewhat stable, compared to the average. Thus I got to deploy and potentially work with the Jedi in derailing the Sith's plans. That's how I found myself along with my 4 closest brothers, stuck once again on Geonosis, waiting for a bunch of rescued Jedi to arrive. My mission was simple: conscript a bunch of Jedi, then if practical go find Dooku and either capture or kill him, thus putting another wrench in Sidious' plans. If that didn't quite pan out, then I was to go for Plan Bish, and then all hell was going to break loose. The Jedi, in particular, the VIP group containing Amidala, arrived at the designated staging area, and as soon as they were out of the LAATs, the transports left, ensuring that no fool Jedi would attempt to commandeer one and go to get themselves killed. Medics rushed to treat the wounded, and I walked slowly at the group of milling Jedi, flanked by 2 companies of level-headed brothers. "Senator Amidala," I spoke aloud. A short woman in dirty clothes that might have been white once upon a time looked up at me. "I'm RC-117, you can call me Chief." And how the hell I ended with that designation and moniker I didn't want to know. I hoped I didn't have to live up to its crazy expectations. I already live more than one insane life, thank you very much. "Chief, what is to be our disposition?" An ancient-looking alien who was quite strong despite that asked. It took me a few moments to recognize Adimundi, and at that realization my arm flared up with phantom pain. It took all I had to keep myself under control at that point, and I idly wondered what kind of disaster one of my less stable brothers might have caused in my position. The esteemed senator from Naboo goes straight in the closest acclamator along with her new babysitters. I nodded at the unlucky captain, who had Amidala duty. "Stories of her luck and proclivity of getting into trouble has reached us. Our contract requires to keep you alive until you can get you back to Republic space, Senator." I gave the Naboo woman a sharp nod. For all her political experience, Amidala wasn't quite accustomed to being treated that way. The senator was even less happy. She spluttered when 2 of my brothers went among the Jedi, unceremoniously picked her under the shoulders, then carried her towards the acclamator. The rest of the company gleefully followed those lucky bastards. "Hey, let her go," Skywalker explained. "Don't get me started on you, boy," Captain Trevor snapped. "You were supposed to be her bodyguard. Why in the name of the Force did you drag your protectee here where many people could legally see her killed? What were you thinking?" Those words temporarily took the wind of Skywalker's sails, and he watched my brothers carry on the protesting senator with an open mouth. This was a treasured material to keep us warm at night, and I was glad we would have it covered by the helmet cameras of dozens of people. "Isn't that a bit rash?" Kit Fisto calmly inquired. The Nauchilan was busy blinking sand off his huge black eyes. "We're at war because of Jedi idiocy. Hundreds of my brothers are already dead because of your ill-thought-up stunt, and many more are going to die today. I'm feeling less than sympathetic." I shot back and paused to take a deep breath. I wasn't sure how much of my anger was genuine and how much it was the dark side criffing up with my head. That wasn't a good place to be at the best of times. Now, if you want to make up for it, I need some volunteers. My unit has standing orders to go after Dooku as soon as our scouts locate him. If we can take him out, we might significantly shorten your war and save countless lives. I'm up to have words with Dooku, Obi-Wan volunteered. I'm in, we'll take him. Skywalker volunteered to get his arm chopped off. I'll come with you boys. Someone has to keep you out of too much trouble, a painfully familiar voice announced. Ever since the Jedi landed, I did my best not to look, much less think about the Togruta woman studying me, and my brothers from the back of the group. Criff my life, why did I have to run into Shock Tai? Now that I wasn't a complete dark side-influenced maniac, I couldn't afford to be anywhere near her without feeling an overwhelming amount of guilt. And the bloody Jedi were all giving me odd looks now. Criff my life. What did I deserve to suffer this? What crime was going a step too far? Equals VW equals. Part 8. Equals VW equals. CT-19994 Night. Geonosis. Possessing technological superiority on our side, or at least parity across the board, was a treat after the last war I remember fighting. The short, one-sided slaughter of an engagement I led against those droid fighters proved that using a handful of superior units as power multipliers worked beautifully in this universe as well. It was another question entirely that despite being a sweet ride to fly, my Torrent was a far cry from what one could design and build if they had the credits to burn. However, those thoughts were for the distant and not-so-distant future, if I had any say about it. Here and now, we had to deal with totally unanticipated complications. Nothing I remember reading or seeing about this universe in any of my previous lives spoke of a crazy mercenary riding to help the Confederate forces at Geonosis. Then again, I don't recall reading anything about a space battle altogether, even though fighting through the local self-defense fleet was a given before deploying troops on the ground. Either way, except for the enemy fighter swarm and how impotent our point defense proved to be, there were no surprises so far. I don't like this, Red Leader, Red 2, my XO and creshmate grumbled over the comm. This is too easy, I can almost smell a trap. We expected to have both tactical and strategic surprise, Red 3 pointed out. Dooku expects the Seppies to lose this one and use the defeat to galvanize them, further tarnishing the Republic. While that's true, Geonosis is a major enemy industrial center. We didn't have to fight our way through a proper system defense fleet. Hell, back home, we got each side having orders of magnitude larger fleets for defense and offense compared to what we saw here so far. And we were stuck just using the resources of the Earth sphere. 2 kept yammering. This makes no sense. You had to say it, didn't you, brother? I finally voiced my exasperation after receiving orders from the flag. Form up on me, we're moving to a blocking position above Geonosis. Enemy reinforcements are confirmed to be on the way. Expect bombers carrying WMDs with fighter escort. That's more like it, 2 added, sounding much calmer and more collected now. Red Leader, with all due respect that I can gather right now, what the criff is wrong with the XO? Red 5 exclaimed. He got most of our fatalist genes and personality, I cheerfully pointed out, complete with an odd fixation on actually liking paperwork. Paperwork's important. What did I ever do to you anyway? Well, I am the benevolent leader of this bunch of us, I began, doing my best imitation of a wise old man. You're the XO, too. Everything unpleasant that happens is on you. That's old NCO wisdom, so we must take it as gospel. 5, can you finally explain to the class how did we get a sassy flight sergeant stuck in this all-officer outfit? 3 kept yammering. Someone in the squadron has to work for a living, sirs. That would make too much sense. From what I heard, our never-sufficiently damned former masters criffed up once again. They only had a vague idea of what they were doing setting up this clusterfuck of an army. Now cut the chatter and look sharp, I suggested. We aren't letting those bastards nuke our brothers on the surface, criff them in an even worse way. A couple of minutes after we took a position, we had multiple Skyhawk squadrons racing our way to reinforce the defense ring above the landing sites. At that point, the enemy reinforcements arrived. Scouts and capital ships with their more powerful sensors detected the incursion first and immediately fed data to our systems. My HUD updated, showing 20 new targets. 8 things called hex deployers and 12 bombers. Those things briefly accelerated towards the planet, then rapidly decelerated when their sensors updated, and the pilots found out what we had waiting for them. Skyhawk Beta, Gamma, and Epsilon squadrons engaged the enemy. Everyone else hold position, Scipio ordered. Those orders made sense. If we all charged at the enemy as a single group, they could bypass us using a short hyperspace jump, if their pilots and navigational computers were good enough to do it before getting overrun anyway. The enemy kept a loose formation, while 28 fighters came at them. At that point, our luck ran out. My HUD updated with new angry enemy symbols showing that a handful of capital ships with escorts just jumped in. The Skyhawks didn't have the time to break out, but instead hit the afterburners and screamed straight down the enemy's throats. The enemy's point defense wasn't much more useful than our own. The 5 fighter squadrons they launched seconds before the Skyhawks could reach their targets were another matter. In a single pass, our obsolete fighters blew up a third of the primary targets, while losing nearly half their strength. 2 whole enemy squadrons went after them, while the other 2 formed up in a defensive formation around the bombers and hex deployers, then headed our way at maximum acceleration. Red Leader, Silver Leader, you've got tactical command of the small craft. Make sure those WMD carriers don't make it to Geonosis. We'll take care of the enemy fleet, Scipio ordered. Like it or not, his orders made sense. If our point defense and AA guns were better, or if the fleet was already in position between the enemy and Geonosis, things might have been different. Silver Leader, Red Leader will take a point, along with Alpha and Delta squadrons. You take care of any leakers, I suggested to my counterpart. Red Leader, Silver Leader, good hunting, and may the Force be with you. The same back to you, brother, I shot back. Alpha 1, Delta 1 form up behind us. We'll engage from long range with missiles, focusing on the enemy escorts, then we'll make you an opening for a clear attack run. You want to test their capabilities first, Silver Leader announced on a private frequency. We don't know the capabilities of the enemy craft, except for the fact they can maul Skyhawks. We also know that the old fighters can take out the primary targets. We're letting the Skyhawks go for those bombers, while we keep the enemy fighters from interfering. That's going to be a cold comfort for you if they do have nasty surprises, Silver Leader pointed out. We all remember dying at Endymion. Ever since then, we've been living on borrowed time, both back home and in this messed-up life. You need therapy, brother, Silver Leader muttered after a brief silence. We all do, I agreed and focused fully on the job at hand. 20 Skyhawks trailed behind us, led by my 10 Torrents. We faced 36 fighters vaguely shaped like birds of prey. Composite sensor scans from the fleet and the odd, still operational sensor drone showed me a wireframe composite of the enemy. 4 heavy cannons, no visible secondary armament. A boxy, relatively small body with attached scythe-like wings which were swept forward. The design wasn't particularly practical for atmospheric flight, though advanced materials and sheer engine powers made up for all kinds of design sins. Then again, we were in the vacuum of space. Outside of a particularly dense nebula or the odd gas cloud, drag was of no consequence out here. Targets will be in range in 10 seconds. Make sure we don't waste missiles on the same target. I warned my squadron and focused on my targeting computer. Decelerate now and fire at will. Neither side used fancy tactics. The enemy had to break through, and speed was their best friend. They didn't want to engage us at all, save for the brief moments our formation would be in effective range of each other. The situation would be different close to the atmosphere, however, depending on the ammunition carried by the primary targets. Jumping them when they would have to decelerate for atmospheric entry could be too little too late. Internal compensators, also known as inertial dampeners, were a wonderful thing. I barely felt a twitch at cutting off my engines and hitting the reverse thrusters. Without that wonder of technology, the deceleration would have made me pass out if I was lucky, if not killed me outright. The rate of approach between our formations slowed down a bit. It was just enough that we would be able to flush our missiles at different targets before entering effective cannon range. The targeting reticule on my HUD went to my chosen target and automatically followed it. 2 seconds later, I both heard a distinct tone and the target lit up in green. My fingers moved on autopilot, and I pressed the trigger, releasing 2 small and agile concussion missiles. 18 more flew from my wingmates before we switched to the next target on the targeting list. Only a few enemy fighters attempted to maneuver. However, given our combined approach speed, they simply lacked the acceleration to escape the targeting envelopes of the incoming missiles. Even worse, doing so would have left them painfully slow and vulnerable at the moment we reached them. The rest of them kept coming. Instead of trying to run, they opened fire, trying to shoot down the missiles racing to kill them. Concentrated funnels of jamming did their best to fry sensitive equipment, and the odd, expensive decoy threw phantom signatures brighter than the fighters themselves. At the same time, our sensor feed became fuzzy, even when it was supplemented by the fleet at large. Nevertheless, I did select my second, then the third target, and let my missiles go. An enemy fighter vanished in a bright explosion, then another. Here and there, small flashes signified successfully intercepted missiles. Those were either particularly good or lucky pilots, perhaps both. Either way, by the time we entered cannon range, the enemy formation was a ragged thing, showing large gaps where our missiles struck true no matter what countermeasures they had to overcome. Instead of being outnumbered nearly 4-1, only 15 fighters came at us, and at least 2 of them were visibly damaged. The following melee lasted mere seconds, yet that was more than enough to sear itself in my mind until my dying day. My next target was one of the damaged mercenary fighters, which unsteadily headed straight at me. I entered a spin, hoping to take advantage of the relatively heavy armor of my torrent and spread out any incoming damage, then opened fire. My target lashed back at me, and a stream of laser bolts passed by my cockpit. My heart raced along, beating rapidly with the thrill of the hunt. A glancing hit shook my fighter, even as I managed to score hits of my own. The enemy disintegrated too close for comfort, and I struggled to cease my spin and place the heavily armored belly of the torrent between my body and the incoming debris. Several dull thumbs rocked my fighter, and more alarm lights lit up in amber on my damage control panel. I could hear my XO scream and instinctively looked outside for any clue. I saw a burning torrent spin out of control, its canopy partially shatter, then remain stuck, while fuel and oxygen turned it into a short-lived funeral pyre. "This is Red Leader. We need SAR at my location," I announced bitterly, and finally got my torrent under a semblance of control. One of my S-foils was a melted ruin, significantly decreasing the ability of the fighter to radiate heat. There was damage on the belly, just enough to mangle my forward landing gear, but that was it. My XO was dead, burned alive, the poor bastard. Red 4 drifted away with his fighter dead and condition undetermined. 6 and 8 were alive, the former managed to punch out safely, while the latter was stuck in a fighter spinning out of control. The rest of my squadron was intact and busy decelerating, so we could join the impending fight above Geonosis. A look at my updating tactical plot told me all I needed to know: our sacrifice was worth it. Only 5 enemy fighters were remaining, with only the leading 2 marginally intact. 4 bombers and 3 hex deployers trailed behind them, all damaged. Barring divine intervention, the bastards were dead. They knew it too, the bastards. Long before they could run into our next defensive line, they cut off their acceleration towards Geonosis and decelerated hard, proclaiming their surrender. I glared at the bastards, hoping that command wouldn't accept their surrender. Why did sanity have to strike down after my brothers died? Did they die for nothing, damn it all? =VW=. If you want to support my writing or discuss this story, Google the following places: Pat Rayon, Delkatar's Writing Corner. The Space Battles Forums. This is where most discussion over my stories takes place. The Sufficient Velocity Forums. Archive of Our Own. The Alternative History Forums. 6 Chapter 2 Parts. Disclaimer: I don't own any of the Star Wars movies, TV series, games, books, or comics. They belong to Disney or their respective copyright owners. Chapter 2 equals VW equals. Part 1 equals VW equals. Fleet Admiral Scipio. Venator Cruiser Thunderstorm. TF and Terry's flagship. Geonosis. Make that 3-star destroyer equivalents with 5 frigate escorts. They've got a single squadron unknown design as CAP. The large hollow image of the battle space updated with new information, helping me visualize what we were dealing with. The primary targets flew straight at my blocking forces. Two enemy fighter squadrons were busy chasing the first Skyhawks to bleed the WMD carriers. That's it, I failed to keep my tongue in check. The enemy numbers and classes roughly matched what the pirates warned us of. It was just that they were all hilariously outmatched. Now, if we hadn't taken Kamino's defense fleet, things might have been different. After all, it contained some of the most powerful and advanced ships anyone bothered to build these days. Without them, facing then the mercenary task force might have been troublesome. I could see how in the original timeline they could have proved a strategic threat even without access to WMDs. Here and now. Comms, hail our guests. Hostile task force, this is Fleet Admiral Scipio. You're outnumbered and outgunned. I have a one-time offer for you. You will shut down your engines, deactivate your weapons and shields, then prepare to receive boarders. If you resist, you will all die for nothing. Republic intruders, this is Captain Kavik Toth of Sabioth Squadron. You've declared war on the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Your crimes will not go unpunished. Surrender now before further reinforcements arrive, and I will suggest to Count Dooku that mercy might be in order. A human voice full of itself answered. I wasn't sure if this was mere bravado, or if the fool really expected that we might buy his bluff. Even if there were more enemy reinforcements on the way, something I believed highly unlikely, then our best bet would be to fight. Annihilate the separatist forces in the system before anyone else could join them, then defeat the reinforcements in detail. Task Force Antares 1-1 will advance at flank speed. Target the frigates first. When they're out of the way, attempt to disable the enemy cruisers if feasible, or blow them out of my battle space if not. Captain, inform the Marines that they might indulge in some boarding action today. I left the other half of my battle fleet to sweep from below the asteroid field and account for any surviving enemy assets in the region. After that, those ships would form into a shield above our landing sites in case of any more unforeseen events. Meanwhile, I would face the enemy with 2 Venators against their 3 cruisers, though the Acclamator carriers and Dreadnought cruisers more than made up the difference in both durability and firepower. I also had a bomber squadron waiting in reserve, though I wouldn't be deploying until we had the enemy fighters dealt with. Commence long-range bombardment, I ordered. Against stationary, not protected targets, turbo lasers draining power from the hypermator reactor of a capital ship could be a danger from as far as 10 light minutes away. In contrast, against anything that could maneuver or had modern armor and shields, the effective range was a fraction of that distance. In this particular case, the distance was short enough. The enemy was stuck on an approach vector towards us, giving them little options for effective evasive maneuvers. The final nail in Captain Toth's coffin was the fact that my ships were close to, if not the best warships currently produced in this galaxy. They were meant for the defense of a wealthy if obscure system, instead of variants built in wartime with various corners cut and meant to be crewed by expendable clones. While Sabioth Squadron might be outfitted with the best they could beg, borrow, or buy from the Confederacy, it was never meant to stand in a line of battle and duke it out against the kind of firepower I could bring to bear. To his credit, Toth figured it out quickly, mere seconds after our second salvo hit home. The first was little more than ranging shots, which were accurate enough. The second overloaded the shields of 3 small frigates. Their light armor was never meant to stand up to cruiser firepower. One simply blew up, the second disintegrated in a series of smaller internal explosions, and the third lost propulsion and fell out of formation, spinning out of control. Enemy return fire splashed over the heavy frontal shields of dreadnought cruisers, which simply plowed through the offensive firepower and kept firing back. At that point, the mercenaries tried to run by slowly shifting course to a vector that would get them clear off Geonosis gravity well. The enemy cruiser closest to our formation lost shields and shook under concentrated barrages. It tried to claw its way to the relative safety of its consorts. However, the other 2 ships shifted vectors, letting our victim soak up more punishment. Hyperspace events, 3+ cruiser class, were receiving IFF, mere resistance ships led by the Tritius. They're launching fighters and engaging Sabioth Squadron. Release the bombers. They're to disable the fleeing enemy cruisers. Hail Captain Toth and demand his surrender. Make it sure he understands that I won't be accepting it after our bombers get there. VW =. Sabioth Destroyer Ravager, Geonosis. Captain Kavik Toth ran. The corridor shook, lights flickered on and off, and alarms sang a funeral song for his dreams. The impossible happened today, and he had to run for his life. The Republic didn't have a fleet or an army. When he learned that, despite that, it dared attack Geonosis in an undoubtedly desperate preemptive strike meant to avert war, Toth saw an opportunity for profit. He would sweep down like a savior, murder a bunch of militia with his hex. Even better, he might be able to disable and take some uncoordinated ships thrown together by the Republic and masking as a battle-ready fleet. It was meant to be a win-win situation for Sabaoth's squadron. That desperate initial fighter strike should have been the best the uncoordinated Republic pacifists could throw at him. The Ravager lurched to the right. Durasteel twisted and screamed, then something large and expensive shattered with a kick that threw the captain face first into the deck. Fresh blood filled his mouth, making him gag. Toth scrambled to his feet and kept running towards the hangar and his fighter, their laid salvation in the form of a compact hyperdrive. All the while, the captain's mind kept screaming at him that this defeat was impossible. It took weeks, if not months, to turn a collection of ships into anything resembling a proper fleet. He should know he had to do it himself, and it took years to forge Sabaoth's squadron into something to fear. No one was going to let go of so many ships from their system defense force for deployment this far out in the rim. The mere existence of a Republic fleet in training would have made up for very different negotiations between them and the Confederacy. Toth would have known such a force existed. And if he had to face anything less than a proper Republic fleet, he would have broken their green crews and ran circles around their inexperienced captains. Instead of that, he found himself facing disciplined and properly aimed long-range bombardment. That was the king of coordination that took training and experience. Toth reached the hangar and stumbled again. This time it happened because the deck finally ceased shaking. Did the impossible enemy write the Ravager off for dead? That didn't matter. That was his chance. He was going to get out of here and plan his revenge. The captain found his feet and ran toward his ship, only to stumble back when a dark form flew in front of him, then quickly decelerated, followed by a second and a third. Toth's scared face went deadly pale at the recognition: assault shuttles and other assorted transports. Side doors and back ramps opened, disgorging armored infantry. Acting on instinct, Toth's right hand went for his blaster, and the last thing he saw was blue light heading straight at him. VW equals. Part 2 VW equals. RC-11 Rock. Near the arena. Geonosis. This was our best chance to stop the Clone Wars in their tracks. It might be a long shot, yet, at the same time, we had both tactical and strategic surprise on our side. Taking out the Separatist leaders, either as prisoners or dead, would derail the Sith's plans. For us clones, it meant the best chance to avoid fighting a war that wasn't ours. That was how I found myself leading one of the commando units racing to cut off Dooku and the company's escape from the Geonosis arena. We followed in the dubious trail left by the suicidal Jedi who began this whole mess. We used the gaps into security and sensor nets created by their incursion, which were too obvious not to be noticed. The CIS knew the Jedi were coming. Without us, without a clone army ready to save the day, Geonosis would have been even more of a disaster for the Jedi Order than it was in the movie I vaguely remembered. It was deliciously ironic. We now used the trap laid down by the enemy to surprise and trap its leadership. The raid on the arena meant to rescue the Jedi who were still alive acted as a further distraction, allowing multiple commando units to slip through the enemy perimeter. Limited airstrikes made our lives easier, removing armored vehicles, AA emplacements, and droid concentrations which would have complicated our work otherwise. We still needed to tread carefully. There was at least a whole regiment of droids, if not more of the bastards, stuck under the arena. We had to quietly slip past them and intercept the fleeing enemy leadership. Kludged together stealth systems helped, though even with them, we wouldn't have made it in time. It was the handful of Jedi or even Sith we had among our brothers who allowed us to sneak in safely past the droids. Most of the machines were busy milling around and trying to dig their way up to the arena, instead of turning around and seeking alternative routes. Luckily, those clankers weren't among the brightest killer robots out there. A one-time signal from Beta informed us that they were on the trail of CIS leaders. A minute later, the same came from Gamma. Meanwhile, we kept creeping forward, going after Dooku. The former, or future Sith attached to our unit, could sense the wanker and kept us on his trail. Unfortunately, that meant we had to go deeper and deeper into the catacombs under the arena. The good news was there were fewer droids down here, but much more of the insectoid locals. Avoiding them all was a chore, and I was pretty sure a few times we got away with sneaking through only thanks to the Sith. How one of our brothers ended up a Sith when he should have known better, I would never know. That said, the bastard knew what he was doing, that much I had to grudgingly admit. He didn't appear to be a frothing-at-the-mouth madman, so that was a plus in my book. Despite that, I couldn't help but wait for the other shoe to drop. Eventually, we reached an underground hangar, which was vaguely familiar. There were a bunch of the locals milling around, making final checks on several distinct-looking small craft. I could remember this place from the big screen. Dooku should be arriving here soon to flee on a speeder bike, escorted by 2 fighters, if we didn't miss him anyway. I gestured to the rest of Alpha Squad to take a position and designated the super battle droids as primary targets. I saw the Sith ready his lightsaber and nod at me, then he raised his free hand, showing me 3 fingers. We could only see each other due to the specially calibrated visors, which gave us shadow outlines of our cloaked forms. Without that, we would have been stumbling into each other all the way here, increasing the odds of detection. This was it. We could end the war here and now. Without Dooku leading the Separatists, Sidious's control over them would be significantly weakened. If our brothers could grab the rest of their leadership, it would mean we would remove most of the future Emperor's pawns off the board. Adrenaline surged through my veins, and the anticipation was killing me. Those were the 3 longest minutes of my life. Then it happened. A door to the right slid open, showing Dooku's dark form stride forward. I wasted no time and opened fire, while the Sith used the Force to remove the safeties of a bunch of grenades and shoved them at their targets. Within moments, concussion waves stunned the few surviving locals, while ionic radiation fried droid circuits. Frag grenades shredded carapace, while the blast waves threw locals around into crumpled bleeding piles. Dooku appeared unfazed. In a blink of an eye, he had his lightsaber up and advanced towards Torch, my demolitions expert. "Spread out aimed shots," I barked. A glance told me we had taken care of all other opposition in the hangar, allowing us to focus on Dooku. All we had to do is distract him, allow our Sith to engage him in close combat, then stun the bastard from the back. It was a simple plan, and it could work. Then everything went to hell in a handbasket. Scope's indicator on my HUD went red, showing his vitals flatlining. I whirled around, coldly searching for whoever took out my sniper. My eyes widened in disbelief, even when something deep down within me wasn't as surprised as it should have been. Our Sith was behind Scope. A blue lightsaber blade came out from the front of my brother's helmet. Scope slowly slid down, and the blade seamlessly cut through the top of his head. My hands shook with indignation and fury as I aimed. By the time I could open fire, the Sith was already moving. At the same time, a choked cry came from behind me, and Torch's indicator went pulsing yellow, then painful red. I opened fire, aiming as close to the lightsaber's hilt as possible. Doing so was supposed to mitigate the odds of a Jedi or Sith properly deflecting shots, much less sending them back to you. Not getting fried by your blaster bolts was always a good thing in my book. The Criffing traitor managed to deflect all my shots, even as I ran towards him, hoping to overwhelm him. I saw him moving his free hand, and the next thing I knew, I was flying through the air. It felt like a mobile suit cold-clocked me with its damned fist. I hit something hard and was pretty sure I blacked out for a moment. I could feel the coppery taste of blood in my mouth. Breathing sent flares of agony through my ribs near my back. I didn't need the flickering warning from my HUD to figure out they were broken. Everyone else in Alpha Squad had a red indicator. Those were people I've been living with and training for a decade now. They were the brothers I never had and earned for in my past lives. They were all dead now, thanks to one of our own, that Criffing traitorous bastard. It was all because of pure spite and fury I managed to get myself up to a kneeling position. I pulled out my sidearm and a grenade and looked for the Sith bastards. They were in the center of the hangar, chatting like old friends. "I can offer you your youth back and a second chance, Count Dooku. I can give you what Sidious used to turn you but would have never given you. I can give you a chance to reforge the galaxy in the way you see fit." The traitor spoke earnestly, in a way that made me pause for a moment before my rage pushed me forward. "This ambush might have been dangerous if you didn't turn on your comrades. Why should I trust you, a traitor?" Dooku reasonably asked. Good, don't trust that bastard and stab him in the face. I all but screamed in my head. The traitor looked at me and raised a hand. I could feel and hear my bones snap like twigs. Despite the painkillers and adrenals supplied by my armor, I screamed. These are merely failed clones. Even at their best, my new brothers are slaves to the Republic. If anything, I pity them. They can only find freedom in death. The traitor removed his helmet, revealing a face identical to the one Rock saw every morning in the mirror. It was the eyes that gave the Sith away. They glowed with malevolent power and madness. A lightsaber ignited with distinct snap hiss. The sky-blue blade came at me at an arch, and all I could do was wait and watch. I fell to the ground, feeling a dull ache, then something bigger collapsed next to me with the clatter of metal hitting rock. I can show you the future that was meant to be, Count Dooku, and I can offer you a future of your own making. What are you going to choose? Those were the last words I heard before the world mercifully went dark.